Hello everybody and welcome. This is Sierra from Sierra T Designs, and today I have for you a navy and gold embossed Christmas card. So let's jump right in. So are you excited? I didn't do snowflakes in this card. So here I'm just showing you the Distress Oxide blender foam organizer that I created. It's free for download on my website. I'll link to it if you want to check it out. I just like to show it because I'm so excited about it. Alright, so I have a piece of navy cardstock that I've cut down, and I'm just showing you, we're going to do some tips and tricks here in embossing. So you can see that I am putting on a fair amount of anti-static powder. I live in Canada. I live in northern British Columbia, and it's quite dry here. So I'm just showing you how much I put on so that I don't have ink or embossing powder that sticks places I don't want it. So you're going to look at that and be like, Sierra, you put on a lot of anti-static powder tool. And you would be right, except that it works. So you can see here, and you can see I've used a darker cardstock, the navy cardstock, so that makes it easier to see. But even when you use a lighter cardstock, if you put a little bit of extra anti-static powder on, it's easier to see the embossing stamp. Or sorry, the Versamark ink stamp. So I put a fair amount on, but I promise you I'm going to show you how to get it all off again. So now I'm going to use Brutus and Monroe's gold embossing powder. And it's gilded, sorry, it's not gold, it's gilded embossing powder. And now you're going to see, so I'm going to hold this, and I'm going to heat up my heat tool before I bring it to the cardstock. This is going to help prevent warping because this isn't a heavy cardstock. I believe it's a Simon Says Stamp navy cardstock, but I don't know because I only had one piece and it was just sitting there and I really wanted a navy piece of cardstock. So I'm not 100% sure. So I've linked a piece of navy cardstock that's similar, but I'm not 100% sure who it came from. So, but you can see there, I held my cardstock, and this is sped up a little bit. Otherwise this video would be a lot longer than the 13 minutes that it is. And you can see how fast it melted, right? Because I heated up my heat tool first. And then I took a microfiber cloth, and you can see that I'm just wiping that powder back off. No problem. No problems at all. It didn't hurt my embossing because it's all melted. It didn't create any problems. So don't be scared to put extra anti-static powder on your cardstock if you're struggling with embossing. So I wanted a little bit more drama in my card. So I took chipped sapphire, Distress Oxide ink, and black soot, and I'm just going to kind of create almost like a halo around my cardstock. And now you're going to see that the chipped sapphire is very, very similar color to the navy that we already have, but it's easier to blend the black soot into another color than to just blend it onto paper. Like, I find that it doesn't give you as good of an ombre. So with that, I wanted another color on there first, which is the chipped sapphire, and then I'm going to take the black soot and blend it into the chipped sapphire so it creates more of an ombre effect into the blue rather than just being quite stark. As of course you're going to be able to see the black soot quite easily as it's black, right? So what stemmed this card? So recently I made a crafty friend, lovely lady, her name's TR, and we were having a conversation. She was struggling a little bit with embossing, and so we kind of went back and forth a bit for conversation, and she asked me some questions and showed me some clips of some things that she was doing, and we just kind of talked about ways to make embossing easier. So that kind of stemmed this card. The whole card actually is pretty much stemmed by TR. So TR, if you're listening, this one's for you, girl. So I'm going to go through tips and tricks that I use. These are not the only tips and tricks. These are not the only ways to emboss. This is just what I've found that works for me, a person who lives in a very dry place. So, I mean, take this with a grain of salt. If it's not what you do is not wrong. This is just what I found works for me. So here I have some Perfect Pearls in the color Perfect Pearl, which is the original powder, and I just have it in a mini mister bottle. I actually saw this on, I believe, Amy R's channel, Prairie Paper and Ink. I've never done it with the little nozzle. I've always just sprayed it on, or I've used a paintbrush or whatnot. So I just thought that was really cool. So I've been trying this out with just pulling the end out and kind of splashing it onto the cardstock. So I wanted some texture in the background. So we're going to add it in a couple of different ways. So the first way we did it, you've seen there, was the Perfect Pearls. Now we're going to take some black soot in some water and splash that on with just a regular paintbrush. This is a size 8 round paintbrush from I think it's Zen, Royal and Langnickle Zen watercolor brushes. I'll have everything linked and listed below. If you ever have a question about any product I've used, they're always linked below, and they're in my coordinating blog post. So if you ever have any questions or concerns about what I'm using, I promise everything is below. And excuse my head there, it's going to get in the way a little bit. And then I'm also going to splash on some chipped sapphire, because the chipped sapphire will stand out against the black soot. So it looks actually quite pretty, and I'll hold it up here so you guys can see it in a little bit. So I'm just going to splash that on using that paintbrush and the water and the glass mat. This is one reason I love the glass mat, is it's so easy to just clean everything off. I know it's reflective, so every once in a while you guys can see me standing there or sitting down, whatever I'm doing at the time, but that the benefits greatly outweigh the cons for me personally. And then you can see that I just took a little bit of water, I splashed it into my hand, and then I used my other hand to flick it on, and I wanted a few bigger drops. So then I took and splashed it into my fingertips and flicked it onto the cardstock. This is all honestly just to create texture in my background. That's all this is doing. And then I'm going to dry it up a little bit. Okay, so now I've sped this up a fair amount because it's going to be the exact same steps that we did to do the sentiment. But I really wanted to add leaves kind of around the Merry Christmas. So this is an Altenew. Oh, sorry. So the sentiment is from scrapbook.com. It's the Big and Bold Christmas. And this Poinsettia stamp set is the Festive Poinsettia by Altenew. Again, everything is linked and listed below. So you can see how much powder tool I put on there. Like, I use a fair amount, and it comes off, I promise. So never feel like you've used too much if you're in a place where you're struggling with getting your embossing to work. So I always double check my lines because this is a fine detail stamp. So I'm going to check my lines, and then I'm going to bring in my heat tool. Now keep in mind, my heat tool is warm at this point because we just used it on the sentiment. I don't know, maybe 5 minutes ago. But I also set my cardstock aside to dry for a little bit because of all the splatter I added on. Keep in mind that that will create stick to your card. And you can see in the bottom of my Tim Holtz stamping platform there, I have some tape. So I never use tape to hold my stuff down on top of the cardstock. Always use the back. Because if you use the top, you're creating another area for more stick to happen. When you lift off that tape and then you try to put embossing powder over top of it, it's just creating another area for the embossing powder to stick. So if you stick it from behind, whether you use tape on your stamping platform, whether you use a piece of purple tape just to hold it down for a few minutes, whatever you want to do, just don't use it on the top of your cardstock. Because of course that will create an issue. And here you can see I'm not going for a perfect stamping. You're going to see when we get a little further in the video that I am planning on adding watermark as well. Watermarked, well, mosquitoes tried to bite me, sorry. Watermarked leaves behind the gold embossed leaves. So with that, I'm not creating perfect stamping. Honestly, I didn't even clean my stamp before I did this. Like, each time I lift the leaves, I didn't clean it in between every time. Don't do that. You should clean it if you're concerned about having a more pristine stamping. I didn't because I wasn't really concerned about it. And I'm going to show you on our last set of leaves, I'm going to make a mistake. I'm not going to see it. And I'm going to show you how to fix it. Okay? So, I promise you, embossing is so much fun and it can create such a lovely card. I mean, everything on this card except the gems is embossing. So, I mean, embossing is just stunning. You know, so I love for everybody to love it as much as I do. And I hope that TR does now after we had a long conversation about embossing. But I'm going to show you here. Okay, here, I'm going to make a mistake. And it's okay. I promise you. We're going to fix it. So the problem, I think, here was that you see the stamp is sitting outside of the stamping platform. So I set it down a few times. So my lines, and I didn't clean my stamp, which would have helped, but I didn't. When we go and put the anti-static on, I don't put as much as I normally do, which is the first thing. The next thing is that I did set the stamp down a few times, so I created extra lines. So when I put on the embossing powder, look at how horrible it looks. Right about here. Look at that. Look at all the extra. I'm sorry it's moving so fast because I've sped this up, but look at all the extra. So I'm staring at it and I'm like, how can I save this? So first I'm going to grab a paintbrush and I'm going to just kind of try to clean it up. So I use a flat paintbrush. I find that's the easiest for me. You can use whatever works for you, but that's what I use. And I kind of went into the sections. And then here in a second, I'm going to realize that I'm not going to save this. And I don't like how much the line work is. So I'm going to sweep it all off. See? Nope, not happening. So I took my paintbrush, I wiped it all off. I also took the microfiber cloth, wiped it off a little bit again. And then I'm going to, or maybe I didn't use my fiber cloth. That's surprising. And then I'm going to add a ton of anti-static powder to them. Now, since we're going to fix it anyway, I'm going to change the angle the stamp is going on because I can. Because we're going to change it. So here, you see that I used a bunch of anti-static powder because we just used embossing powder. And if we just used embossing ink and we emboss again, it's going to put embossing powder all over those lines. So you can see how much better those lines stick out. And now watch. You see that? Look how good that is. Look how good that stamping is. And then we're going to pull in our heat tool. And now granted again, I know that's a lot of anti-static, but I promise you it wipes off. No problem. And none of that embossing powder stuck in those lines. You can see them a little bit where the anti-static powder is, but you can't see it where the embossing powder is. So I did take this off camera and I wiped it down with my microfiber cloth, the exact same I did as when we did the sentiment. And now I'm just using the exact same stamp and I'm going around using the Versamark ink and just stamping down watermarked leaves, just to add more texture to the background. Because again, this whole card is just navy and gold, other than the little bit of black soot we used to kind of create some drama around the outside. So with that, I want texture. I want something to stand out and make it look really appealing and not just simple. Now, granted, you know what? This card, navy and gold, is quite stunning together, although I'll tell you that my mom informed me that this is also not classic Christmas, traditional Christmas. I think she's giving me a hard time, but navy and gold looks stunning. So whether or not you took the extra steps of putting the splashes in the background or the watermarked leaves or any of that, you probably don't need it. It's just that that's how I like to do it, so that's what I did. But by all means, do what works for you. Do what you enjoy doing. That is the beauty in us creating, is that you create something that you love at the end. And I think this card turned out stunning. I'm going to be honest with you. I love it so much. So you're going to see me. Now I'm going to take my Nuvo Deluxe glue, and I'm still squeezing the dickens out of this bottle. I have a new one came in finally, but I want to get every drop out of this bottle, so you can always see that I'm like squeezing really hard to get every single drop of glue out of this bottle. And it's getting to the end, so it's a bit interesting. And I'm going to use my black mat like you know I always do. I love a black mat. I feel like it helps everything pop so much. And it's 1/8 of an inch smaller than my panel. And my card base is an A2 size card base, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And so my black mat is also 1/8 smaller than my card base. This is just my thing. By all means, you don't need the black mat. It's just, I love them. As if you've been with me for a minute, you know, I love a black mat. So I'm going to squeeze the dickens out of this glue again, get a little more out, and I'm going to stick it down to my card base. And then we're going to add some Pink Fresh Studio jewels. I chose the black ones. I only added, I think, 5 jewels because I like to work in uneven numbers. And it is the Pink Fresh Studios Essential Jewels Mix, and I just chose the black one out of this set. I love this set of jewels. If you've been with me for even half a second, you know how much I love bling, and those jewels are stunning. I love them. There's so many colors in that mix. It's a little bit pricey. I think it's about $30 US, but totally worth it in my opinion. Just because there's so many jewels. So that is the card for today. This is the 3rd one in our Christmas in July. I hope you liked it. If you're new to me, I'd love to have you subscribe. Leave me a comment, leave me a like, leave me anything you want to. I read all the comments and I always respond. So thank you so much for stopping by, guys, and I cannot wait to see you until next Monday.